In this video, we're going to look at problems using the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations, but we're going to include an example with imaginary solutions. And so this first one, it says, solve this equation with the quadratic formula. Well, my first step is going to make my quadratic going to be to make my quadratic equal to 0. So I subtracted 3 from both sides of the equation, and now I can identify my a value, my b value, and my c value. So we have here that a equals 2, b equals -4, don't lose the negative in front of the b, and then c equals -3. And this is important. If you look at the original, you might think that c is +3, but after you subtract it from both sides and make your quadratic equal to 0, c is actually a -3. So I've got our quadratic formula down here in the corner to reference, but we are going to do x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I'm going to start by simplifying the part under the radical. We call that our discriminant. So we have the opposite of -4, which is 4. -4 squared is 16, and -4 times 2 times -3, that would be +24, and that's all over 4. 16 plus 24, that's going to be 40 all over 4. And now what we're going to have to do here is, in some situations you could leave your answer as this since it's a non-perfect square, but we want to simplify that radical. So I know that 40, and I'm not going to go into why in this video, but 40 is equal to 2 roots of 10. So if you're confused on how I went from there to there, you need to look at a video about how to simplify radicals. That's not the focus of this video, but that's how I got from there to there. So search for simplifying radicals if that's confusing, but this is considered more simplified than this does. Now I'm going to bounce back up here and finish the problem. So what we have is we have the 4 can be divided by 4, and then the 2 can be divided by 4. And 2 over 4 is the same thing as 1/2 the root of 10, or I could just rewrite that as the root of 10 over, oops, not all over 2. So you could look at that a couple of different ways, a few different ways of writing that answer, but I'd be okay with that form of it. Let's look at another problem. Now we're going to solve this equation with the quadratic formula, and we're going to begin this just like we did the last problem. I'm going to add 4x to both sides to make my quadratic equal to 0, and that will allow us to identify our a, b, and c. We know that a equals 3, b equals 4, and c equals 2. So if we're using our quadratic formula, which once again is down here in the corner to reference, we have that x equals -b, so the opposite of 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that's going to be all over 2a. Now, let's simplify a bit. We have 16 minus 12 times 2, which would be 24, and that becomes -4 plus or minus the root of -8 all over 6. And here's where this can get a little bit hairy, is dealing with a negative discriminant, a negative value under your square root sign. So what we know is this. We know a couple of things. For one, we know that 8 is -1 times 8. And if we come over here and do some aside work for simplifying this, if I come over here to do some aside work, and we have -1 times 8, we know that's equal to the square root of -1 times the square root of 8. The square root of 1 is just I. The square root of 8 is 2 roots of 2. Remember, if you're confused about how to get from there to there, watch a video over simplifying radicals. It's not the focus of this video, so I'm not doing it right now. And so if you have this value, that could be rewritten as 2i roots of 2. So if I come back to the problem at hand, I'm going to kind of go from there to up here. We had -4 plus or minus, and then the -1 times the 8 under the radical simplified to all this. Okay? just to be clear about the transition we made, we turned this, we came over here and did some math, and it became this. And then that's all over 6. What we can do at this point is we can simplify both of these fractions. Negative 4 over 6 is negative 2/3. And then 2i over 6, 2 over 6 is just 1, so you could have 1i over 3, or just simplify it to I over 3. So a few different forms you could write that answer. You could leave it like that. You could leave it as negative 2 plus or minus I all over 3, like that. Either of those would be acceptable in this case.